If you had $1 for every word written recently about the globe's latest rebel sports league, R360, said to impact rugby and rugby league in a big way, then you'd be a pretty rich person by now. Much of the negativity is coming from News Corp papers here in Australia because they've got a patch to protect. They don't want their rugby league product being impacted by these backers coming in and taking the best of the best for this rumoured competition set to begin in late 2026. So what is it about the sporting environment at the moment that keeps throwing up opportunities where these rebel leagues think they can come in and be successful? We can go all the way back to World Series cricket, if you like, in the 1970s and the impact that had. But since then, we've seen numerous iterations. We've seen the establishment of the IPL in India, which was controversial at the time. We've seen Live Golf yet to return a profit, but is it having the cut-through that the backers of that needed to get a seat at the table? These are some of the bigger topics around the whole issue of rebel leagues and what will happen with R360. On this week's episode of the Sports Ambassador podcast, I sit down with three people who probably know more about these sorts of things than almost anybody else on the planet.
I guess we work in the global rugby environment, and in looking after the rugby players globally. We deal with stakeholders in Europe who look after the French and English club games, and there's a hell of a lot of content. The players are playing a hell of a lot. They're getting tugged in both directions by the club and the international game. And, you know, your first reaction when you see a franchise model like this, which I guess is you know, based on the same sort of model as a Live Golf, is, well, potentially we need a circuit breaker. We need something that's going to make people think about the amount that we're the duress that we're putting our players under, both mentally and physically. And so I guess you look at it through that lens and you say, yeah, they're planning to play 16 matches a year initially. They're planning to make players available for international rugby duty, although we've very recently seen that the international national unions in rugby aren't looking to pick them, which is probably a predictable stance for them to take. But I think at a base level you'd say, well, it's probably good for the game that we're trying to shake things up, for want of a better term. But then you look at it and say, well, it's got to add value to the game of rugby collectively. It can't cannibalise the sport. It's got to align with the principles of the sport as well. So, you know, we put a lot of money in our sport in rugby union, but also in rugby league it would be the same thing. And, you know, I met with Clint Newton this morning, the head of the Rugby League Players Association, and had a similar discussion where, you know, we put a lot of money into our grassroots systems. Typically in most Tier 1 rugby union nations, about a third of their overall revenues get injected back into growing the grassroots. Now, that's not a concern of this franchise model, and, you know, in a lot of ways, the national unions and the clubs around the world develop the players, and then they're cherry-picked off the top shelf when they're at a premium. And so in that respect, you've got to ask yourself the question, does it align with the principles? Does it make rugby as a product better? And you know, you could argue that that's questionable.
Are sports governing bodies as they exist probably sharing a little bit of the blame as to why a lot of this is happening?
Oh, yeah. Well, one of the reasons why you can attract high-paid players to a higher-paid league is because of the way you've been treated. I mean, probably what's not well known is that, generally speaking, across the world, trade unions have been in decline. So, for example, in Australia in the 1980s, there was 1 in 2 workers belonged to unions. Now it's about 1 in 8. 12-13% belong to unions. In the world of sport, there are over 200 player associations. This has been a phenomenal growth in player associations across the globe, across sports. So players in about 40 different sports have player associations. The popular sports, to things like polo players, even Indian chess players, have player associations. So where sports administrators have got a sort of a dismissive attitude to the workforce who provide everyone with, including us, with our role, a role in life. If you've got that attitude and if you don't change, you're going to have change forced upon you. So, the two issues you raised, they're just playing too much and concussion, and concussion's a really big problem. So sports need to, improve their acts on all of that sort of stuff. So if you treat people properly, they usually respond well to you. If you don't treat them properly, you dismiss them as, well, we don't have to worry about you, there's always another player coming up.
What we're also seeing, though, is now the interjection of, private equity funds, venture capitalists, angel investors, and many people, the most cynical of us, would say it's turned into a money-making machine for other sectors. And within that also, you've seen this incredible shift and change in the media landscape with new media, social media. You'd have to say now almost that what was new media is now the mainstream. And so how is that going to impact sports, which have come to rely so heavily on the one network buying up, $1 billion worth of rights to a particular competition?
Well, let me go back to last night at Wembley. Again, Rick and I were talking about the changes that have taken place in football. And we were talking about the owners or the chairman of the clubs back when we started the EPL, and they were local businessmen. The people that own club now are nation states. The people who own clubs are international billionaires. It has gone from, sports has always been tribal, but it has now moved to the fact that it's gone from tribal to global. What is this going to mean for sports? The equation of sports and money is always the basic definition of economics. It's all supply and demand. That sports will get the well-run sports with emphasis on the well-run, are going to get richer and richer and richer. Because it doesn't matter how the message is getting to the people. It gets back to a Canadian, the medium is the message. It doesn't matter if it's streaming, that media companies, whether they're streaming, whether they're free-to-air television, whether it's whatever it is, are going to be desperate to get the exclusive rights, which means there's going to be ongoing, that again, will run, that their coffers are going to get loaded up every time a rights negotiation comes up.
Gracie, I love talking to you.
Look, just to put it bluntly, there are some dickhead coaches and trainers out there.
I think I've actually heard that label applied to you.
Well, hopefully the whole thing will not develop into World War III.
The Sports Ambassador.